Indeed.
All right, good afternoon. I appreciate everybody coming out. I want to start off first by saying that I'm not here today to pass judgment on the actions of law enforcement in Charlottesville. I think there's too much that's not known yet as far as how everything transpired. But what I really want to do, first of all, is express my condolences to the families of those that lost loved ones this past weekend in that violence. We saw 3 people lose their lives unnecessarily. And as I've said over the weekend, there is no room in this society for those types of violence, that type of bigotry, and that type of hatred that we saw on display this past weekend. Hatred that led to the loss of 3 lives. 32-year-old Heather Heyer, who by all accounts, when you read in the media or pay attention to what people say about her, was a wonderful individual who spent her time engaged in activism for those less privileged. Among many of the descriptions, the one that I saw that stood out the most described her as a young woman who was a passionate advocate for the disenfranchised, who was often moved to tears by the world's injustices. So again, this was a young lady living her life trying to improve the lives of others, and had her life unnecessarily and violently taken away from her through acts of hatred and bigotry. We also lost 2 members of the law enforcement family this weekend, also as a result of these acts. Virginia State Police Lieutenant Cullen, who had served 23 years with the police department as the commander of the aviation unit, who left behind a wife and 2 sons. And then also Trooper Burke Bates, who had served 13 years with the state police and who leaves behind a wife and twin children, and who was 1 day short of his 41st birthday. These were 3 individuals leading their lives, trying to improve the lives of other people, and all who lost their lives out of acts of hatred and violence. It's against this horrific backdrop that I want to talk about what we do here in Austin and how we prepare for public demonstrations. Being the home of the state capitol, we're very familiar with public demonstrations. We're very familiar with protests and with marches. We had a very long-standing Occupy Austin movement here several years back. And again, we successfully managed all of these events. The main thing that we use here in the Austin Police Department, we have a special response team. And this is a team that many of you all are aware of. It's our officers that have received special training and have special equipment that aid in handling large-scale demonstrations. The motto of this team is defend the first, and that is what they're focused on, is letting people exercise their First Amendment rights to free speech, but we ensure to the best of our abilities that it is done in a proper, safe, and lawful manner. This team has a successful history. We've handled the Occupy Austin protests, as I mentioned earlier, that went on for many, many months. We regularly handle large-scale events that take place in the city of Austin, whether that be Mardi Gras or the Texas Relays or the recent March for Women that took place last year. These are large-scale events, and we're regularly there. We also saw last year a very divided political season, and we had many different marches and protests that took place in Austin. And they took place without violence, and again, under the watchful eye of our special response team to ensure that everyone could come forward, exercise their freedom of speech rights, and do so in the safest manner possible. What we do as we work towards these large events is we pay close attention to social media. We hear about events that may take place, whether it be a march, a protest, anything like that. We pay attention to the social media surrounding that so we can understand the scope of that event. We can understand whether there may be counter events that are planned to challenge the individuals that are partaking in the first one, to look at the size again so we can plan appropriately. We then partner with our other law enforcement agencies or public safety agencies. If it is oftentimes occurring on the state capitol grounds, either the event will begin at the state capitol, will end at the state capitol. So DPS takes the lead role in all of the events that take place on the capitol grounds, and we coordinate anything that takes place outside of the capitol grounds, or if we need to go in and assist. We also see a lot of activity that takes place on the University of Texas campus, and so we work closely with the University of Texas Police Department in ensuring the safety of those free speech events, and then helping them if those events lead off campus or if they need assistance on campus. We bring in other groups such as our Office of Emergency Management if there are larger events that are taking place that require more of a citywide perspective to oversee what the potential impacts could be. But I think what's important to note, and one of the things that we do here, is we work with the leaders of the various groups that tend to either protest, come out and march, and come out and speak. We meet with them not only when they have activities planned, we meet with them throughout the year. We maintain relationships with the leadership of our local advocacy groups, those that will work with us and speak with us. We meet with them throughout the year so that we're not only working with them in advance of a planned protest or a planned march or a planned community event. And I think that's what's important, because that way, when we are in the moment, when we are at one of these events, if something is occurring or if things seem to be going sideways, we know who to reach out to, we know who to speak to, and we know who to try and set things right. We meet with them in advance of these planned events to go over the expectations, to go over the ground rules, and again, all of this being done to ensure that we're protecting the First Amendment rights to free speech, but that we're doing it in a manner that allows everyone to be as safe as possible. So again, I'm not here at all to cast any judgment on what happened this past weekend in Charlottesville as far as a law enforcement response. I think what we saw was demonstrations like we have not seen in this country in a long time. We saw bigotry, hatred, and violence on display to a level that we have not in decades, and it's unacceptable. And I think it's time that we all have to take a look inward and be part of the solution. And that's how we approach demonstrations in Austin. That's how we work with our activist community, and that's what we do to try and ensure that we keep the Austin community safe while honoring everyone's right to free speech. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Got the Dixie thing coming up, the Dixie March. Are y'all already kind of preparing for that? Or?
Yes, so we are aware that there are some events that are being planned in Austin, either surrounding the Confederacy or events related to this past weekend in Charlottesville. So we are paying attention to those as we do to other events that pop up, and we will be staffed accordingly to allow for safety.
And what about recruitment efforts? Is there any concern? I know that UT has their own procedure as far as what groups are allowed to kind of recruit and set up booths and things on campus. Is that a concern, or do you guys have the ability to look at recruitment of different hate groups?
Well, the university is kind of a different position in that they kind of control their campus. So it's really the responsibility of a business owner who they may want to let inside their business, or then we would fall back to federal law if there's individuals that are wanting to use public space that's owned and managed by the city.
Do Austin Police track hate groups locally? Do we know who's active here? Is that something that you get involved in before there's an incident?
Yes, we keep up with the local hate groups just like we keep up with street gangs and all of that. It's a group that we are aware of, and when we get public demonstrations, we do pay attention to which groups, especially if they're linked in with hate groups, may be present.
Do you know which ones are active off the top of your head, or are there any in particular that you are particularly concerned about?
No, if you want to get specifics, we can pull specific numbers or statistics for you if you'd like.
What kind of concerns do you have moving forward in Austin in light of what has happened in Virginia?
Well, I think that we're expecting that there will be community events. There will be, whether it be marches or protests, and I think that we're going to see that across the country. But being in Austin, having the history that we have here in Austin, we will continue to work with the leaders of the various groups that we think will lead these efforts. And again, we will honor everyone's right to free speech, but we will ensure that we're doing it in a manner that's as safe as possible.
You have a second to talk about the initiative at the Arch tomorrow. It's starting tomorrow.
That's not the purpose of today, so yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Casey,